In this video, we will attempt to explain the Less Paper, More Aid initiative, which aims to reduce the burden of donor conditions to improve the efficiency of humanitarian action. We all acknowledge the importance of reporting in order to remain accountable, as well as it being a useful tool to improve the quality and efficiency of humanitarian action. Have a look at how reporting can become excessive and affect the delivery of principled and effective humanitarian aid. Let's start with the donor. Let's call him Mr. Donor. Mr. Donor is looking to contribute a large sum of money so that a water pump can be built. First, he wants to give his money to an aid agency such as the UN. The aid agency is not going to directly implement the project, therefore they transfer some of the money to a partnered non-governmental organization who understands where to build the pump and which pump is most appropriate. But, given the situation in a country, the NGO might not have direct access to the population or have all the tools needed to properly mobilize the local community. So they partner with first and frontline responders. So what exactly happens to the large sum of money initially given by Mr. Donor? The large sum of money becomes smaller in the transaction, from Mr. Donor to the aid agency, to the NGOs, and to the first and frontline responders. Now what about reporting requirements? With all of this funding come certain conditions. Donor conditions mean a lot of paperwork, specifically for the first and frontline responders. Their paperwork has been requested by the NGO, whose paperwork in turn was requested by the aid agency. The amount of reporting is often inversely related to the amount of funding received, leaving aid agencies with fewer reports. Mr. Donor may want to know what was done with his sum of money or how many water pumps were constructed, so he asks the aid agency for only 1 or 2 reports. While a few reports don't seem like much, keep in mind that none of these reports have a standard format, which is draining on both financial and human capital. Instead of focusing on humanitarian aid, reporting becomes the dominant factor. Not only that, but donors at any time can call and ask for additional supplementary reports, which can then lead the first and frontline responders to being inundated with paperwork, leaving less time for humanitarian action. For the sake of simplicity, let's say the donor asks for 2 reports from the aid agency to check on the pump. This then causes NGOs to have 4 extra reports, which causes 12 extra reports for the frontline responders, who have the most reporting to do. It is a combination of these requests that may add at least 18 reports. In addition to the 18 reports, if building the water pump solicits any more funding and a private donor is introduced, then more paperwork will be introduced as well. These additional reports are often the most disruptive and taxing. As it stands, the paperwork to funding ratio is highly disproportionate. The international community needs to focus on simplification, harmonization, and proportionality if there is to be a balancing of the scales. For a more detailed look on how to reduce the burden of donor conditions to improve the efficiency of humanitarian action, go to lesspapermoreaid.org. This video is an attempt to simplify a very complex system and does not reflect all donor conditions, but rather highlights some of the current issues that can occur within humanitarian financing.